Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Onboarding. Did your organization have you at hello? Today's presenters are Bob Lavinia, Director of the Institute for Public Sector Employee Engagement, and Melissa Asher, Senior Practice Leader at CPS HR Consulting. The presentation slides and video recording will be available online at www.cpshr.us, and we'll also post a link to it on LinkedIn. During the webinar, if you have questions, please use the comment box in WebEx. Now that we have all that out of the way, I'd like to formally welcome Bob and Melissa.
Thanks very much. This is Bob. Thank you very much, Jason. We're happy to be with you in this webinar. We'll do a little bit more introduction. I will, and then my colleague Melissa will. I am as you heard, the director of the CPS HR Institute for Public Sector Employee Engagement, a unit that was created several years ago to focus more specifically on helping public sector organizations measure and improve engagement. I've had a lot of onboarding experiences because I've had quite a few jobs. But previously, I was Assistant Vice Chancellor and Director of Human Resources for the University of Wisconsin. I'm coming to you from my home in Madison, Wisconsin today. I was Vice President of a nonprofit, the Partnership for Public Service, Director of the Wisconsin Civil Service System, and began my career in the federal government with the Government Accountability Office. Melissa?
Yes, hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Just a little bit about me. I've been working in the HR world for over 25 years now. That seems like a long time. And like Bob, I have come across onboarding in a number of different ways, probably not so much in different professions myself. I've really worked primarily for two fabulous firms. But in the work that I have done in either the training arena, where we have helped in some form or fashion with onboarding, or more recently in the recruiting area, where onboarding is increasingly a conversation that we talk with our clients about, because we want all of those recruitments to go smoothly and stick and stay for a nice, long, successful career. So hopefully Bob and I, combined with our years of experience, hard-won wisdom, we've got some good information to share with you here today. We want you to walk away with at least a couple of takeaways. So Bob, want to get us started?
Will do, Melissa. Again, welcome to everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending upon where you are. We have folks dialed in from all over the country, and actually even a couple of folks who are participating from abroad. When I start a session like this, I always like to say that I believe the biggest challenge facing public sector organizations, really maybe all organizations, but especially government, is attracting, developing, engaging, and retaining talent. Because in government, and I know I'm preaching to the converted, our ability to succeed depends almost entirely on our level of talent. The right people with the right skills in the right places at the right times. We can have the best policies, the best ideas, even the best technology. But if we don't have talent to execute, we can't succeed. And I think we've all realized over the last several months in this new world of work that we find ourselves in as a result of COVID, that's even more important. We hear and read a lot about how COVID is affecting other parts of the economy, the restaurant industry, travel, retail. We hear less about how COVID is affecting government, but I know you're under pressure to continually deliver essential services while facing shrinking budgets and workforces. One estimate is that state and local governments are facing deficits of $1 trillion. That's trillion with a T. So we know you need to do more with less, and even more with even less. And it really requires a focus in government on talent management. And one of those areas is onboarding. So we'll define onboarding, make sure we're sort of on the same page. Then we'll talk about the business case, the return on investment on onboarding. Why does onboarding matter? And why should our organizations focus on it? It is really about delivering performance. It's not another touchy-feely thing. It's not just another HR strategy, and I don't mean that pejoratively. I'm in the same business as the HR folks, but it's important to understand the business case. Then Melissa will talk to you about some best practices, including introducing a model that we have developed that lays out the onboarding process. And of course, as I just mentioned, we really need to talk about how onboarding has changed and how organizations have adapted onboarding during the COVID-19 crisis. So here's a picture that I hope you're chuckling about. We hope no employees will ever experience this on their first day in a new job or in a new position. And while this is obviously an exaggeration. Too often, when the new employee is ready for the job is not ready for the new employee. So we hope, at least for this person, they gave them a chair. And we could probably devote most of this hour to sharing our onboarding stories, and many of them probably wouldn't be positive stories, and Melissa and I probably have our own, but we're not going to do that. What we hope you will reflect on as we go through this webinar is your own onboarding experiences, ones you've had or what you've seen in the organizations where you've worked, and how we can make onboarding a positive experience for all new employees. And I'll say this, and you'll probably hear it again, but you only get one chance to make a first impression. So what is onboarding? Several key points that we will emphasize throughout the webinar. Fundamentally, it's an integrated set of activities designed to give the new employee the resources, the information, and the support to be successful and to be productive as soon as possible. And it also means helping the new employee understand and integrate into the culture of the organization. What's important? How do we really do things around here? How do we really communicate? How do we really make decisions? Despite formal policies and procedures, how do we get things done in this organization? And it's at least a year-long process. This slide shows it as a year-long process, but really it's more than that, because it begins when a new employee accepts a job offer. So even before they show up for work, and it extends throughout the new employee's entire first year. And while orientation is an important part of onboarding, orientation and onboarding are not the same things. And here we show some of the distinctions between orientation and onboarding in terms of timing, for example. Orientation is a very transactional event during the first week of the new employee's tenure, more or less. But onboarding is a strategic approach, systematic set of activities designed to make the employee as successful and as possible and feel good about the job. So orientation, really kind of nuts and bolts, organization structure, mission, policies. Onboarding, it's a two-way street, proactively involves the new hire in all of these activities and provides that person with what they need to be successful. Orientation, usually you maybe sit through some presentations, but as I mentioned, in onboarding, it is an interactive two-way relationship. The employee is actively engaged and also mentored. Sometimes when we think of orientation, we think of it as an HR activity, and that's okay. But onboarding goes beyond that. It involves, as you see here, multiple people in departments, especially the new hires manager and supervisor. One of the key focus points in onboarding is creating a good relationship between the new employee and their manager or supervisor right from the start. And orientation, a lot of paperwork, general information about the organization. Onboarding, as I mentioned, is an integrated set of activities throughout the new employee's entire first year. So now that we've defined it, let's talk about why it matters. What's the business case? What is the return of investment of onboarding? Now, a lot of research done, and what we'll share with you today is really the tip of the iceberg, revealing why organizations should develop and implement solid onboarding programs. So I'm going to show you a few numbers. The idea isn't for you to memorize the numbers. It's really for you to understand that there is a strong body of empirical research connecting the dots between good onboarding practices and organizational success and performance with respect to performance and productivity, retention, and even employee engagement. And one of the things that we like about onboarding is it doesn't cost a lot of money to make sure that when the new employee is ready for the job is ready for the new employee. To make sure that we have structure in place to give that new employee what she or he needs to be successful and to feel good about their job and the organization. So one of the areas is productivity and performance. And you see three sets of numbers here, which I'll explain. As reported by Forbes, organizations with structured and standardized onboarding processes have 54% higher productivity from their new employees than organizations that don't have structured and standardized onboarding processes. Another survey, 77% of new hires hit their first performance milestones had formal onboarding training, 77%. And then this last number, employees in organizations with comprehensive onboarding programs achieve full proficiency, faster time to productivity, 34% faster than employees in organizations that don't have comprehensive onboarding programs. That translates into 4 months faster to full-time or full productivity. How about retention? This is an area where there's been a lot of research, and really we show some dramatic differences. So 64, and this is all research-based, 69% of employees are more likely to stay with the organization for at least 3 years if they have a great onboarding experience. And, other research shows that employees make a decision about whether or not they're going to stay with the organization in their first 3 months. So again, you only get one chance to make a first impression. New employees who went through, again, a structured interview program were 58% more likely to be with the organization after 3 years. So really some dramatic evidence of the value of onboarding. And to go back to a point I made earlier, if COVID results in downsized workforces, especially in government to deal with that $1 trillion budget deficit, retention is even going to be more critical because we're going to have fewer people to do the same or more work. So when we hire someone, it's more important than ever that they have a good experience and they will stay with the organization. So employee engagement, a link between effective onboarding practices and high levels of employee engagement. And we in the Institute have done national research, national surveys to assess the impact of a high level of employee engagement. And we, like many other organizations, have found that high engagement translates into high levels of organizational performance. So we want our employees, especially our new employees, to be engaged as quickly as possible. So again, as reported in Forbes, organizations with structured and standardized onboarding processes, new employees in those organizations have twice the level of engagement in organizations that don't have structured and standardized onboarding processes. Another research showed that organizations with structured onboarding, 58% higher levels of employee engagement. So performance and productivity, retention, and employee engagement, all linked to a structured and comprehensive onboarding program. Not just orientation. Orientation is part of onboarding, but onboarding is a much more comprehensive approach, and we'll see that in a moment. So given the definition and some of the research that I've shared with you around the business case for engagement, we want you to participate now. We want you to answer this question in a few words. Why do you think onboarding is important, based on your own experiences, based on what you've seen in the organizations where you've worked? So take a minute or two, think about this, and share with us a couple of comments about why you think onboarding is important.
And everyone can just put it in the chat window to answer that question. Why do you think onboarding is important?
And then Melissa and I will share some of your comments.
Yeah, use that chat feature. This is where we get to practice our texting skills, which we're all really good at. Just a couple word or two words. Just what are your thoughts on this? Oh, here we go. Helps new employees to feel welcomed and engaged. Need to make a good impression. Yes, Bob talked about only having one shot at a first impression. Let's make it a good one. Some folks are picking up what you were just talking about, Bob, around productivity and retention.
Yeah. Accelerates learning and productivity.
Yeah.
Part of the team, feel a sense of belonging to the organization. Sure.
Yep. How we can relate to each other.
That's the important. Employee know they're important, feel valued enough so that the organization is doing what it needs to do to make sure that I can be an important part of the organization.
Absolutely. Explaining how the organization runs. That's right. They don't walk in knowing, especially if they're coming from outside the organization.
New hire feels supported. It can be a stressful experience to start a new job, and unless you feel like the organization is behind you, it's going to be a lot tougher.
Yeah. To demonstrate expectations. It does. It sets that tone. right up front, we're taking your new role seriously, and then it sends that message that you want the employee to take that new role seriously and become engaged.
And it also says, as Melissa said, it sends the message that this organization cares about employees. So it's not just the onboarding, but it's the whole philosophy of the organization about its most important resource, its people.
I like this one from Michelle. It's a manifestation of how organized an organization is. It is kind of important to come across as being organized, being ready to hit the ground running with the new hire. Like we're both in it together, and we're organized and ready to roll.
Okay, well, some good comments. Let's move ahead. So we're going to put you to work again. We have a poll. Now, we've talked about why engagement is important, but what we found and what other organizations found in research is that most organizations don't have comprehensive onboarding programs. February 2020 survey, 36% of the organizations who responded did not have a structured onboarding process. Another poll, 76% of HR managers believe onboarding is underutilized. So we'd like to move that 36% up, especially in the public sector, to closer to 100. We want to get a sense of where your organizations are. So here's our poll. Does your organization conduct onboarding? And yes, no, or I don't know. You can use our definition or your own sense of what onboarding is. We just want to get a quick idea of where you stand in the onboarding process. So
Jason's helping us with this poll.
Yeah.
So
Jason, give us a few minutes to answer the question.
Yeah, so we'll have a couple of minutes here. I see people already flying in with responses, so it should be on your screen, and then we'll share the results with everyone.
Can I vote too, Jason? Oh, I guess
you can vote.
Just don't
your
tell
vote's
us how
not
you
counted.
We're gonna tell management how you vote, Melissa.
Yeah, I know.
I'll keep that in mind then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting to do a little canvassing of the audience.
And if your answer is yes, we hope you will see and hear something today that will help you improve your onboarding process. If the answer is no, we hope you'll go back to your organization and begin to have a conversation about why this is important. If your answer is I don't know, we hope you go back to the organization and find out.
Alrighty, I'm going to close the poll now, share the results.
We're anxiously awaiting Jason.
I know it's counting down on me. It says it's 2 seconds left before I can share the results. Okay.
Responses. It's been overwhelmed.
Ah, here it goes.
Okay, so it looks like I don't see the percentages. I see the numbers. So oh yeah, here we go. So yes, 56%. So more than half of you have an onboarding program. Like I said, I hope you'll learn something today that will help you improve that program. 13% are no, and 2% don't know, and then 29% decided they didn't want to share their opinions with us. So the key takeaway here is more than half of you have onboarding programs. So that's great. And those of you who don't or don't know, I hope what you learned today will motivate you to go back and begin to have that conversation. So thank you very much. So before I toss it to Melissa, I want to show this cartoon. This is a Dilbert cartoon, and as usual, Dilbert points out the way not to do something. So the new employee says, I've only worked here one day, thought of a great idea. He gets zapped by the boss. Dilbert says, the first idea is always the toughest. The urge eventually goes away. So this is not how to do onboarding. I'm going to send it to Melissa, and she's going to talk about how we should do onboarding.
Yes, what a great segue. Thank you so much, Bob. We definitely need to give Dilbert and the pointy-haired boss some tips here. So without further ado, let's introduce the model, a model that we are going to now kind of work our way through. In our work with our clients, we like to start with a model. Now, this particular model is broken down. I'm going to walk us through it. You don't have to duplicate this model. This model is kind of designed. It could be it's 5 phases. It could be 3, it could be 7. The different activities and things around it can certainly be modified. But one of the key takeaways that we want you to get out of this today is that onboarding is a set of planned and coordinated activities. They must be planned and they must be coordinated. It's not one person, one individual's job to make sure all of this happens, because to ensure that the employee has the support, the knowledge, and the resources, it's going to take a number of people within your organization to do that. And like Bob said, it's really important to make sure that when that employee walks through the door, they're ready to roll, they're excited. The organization needs to be excited. The organization needs to be ready, and that needs to have been demonstrated by spending some time getting ready, setting the foundation. Many of the things that you all pointed out when you told us why it was important tie exactly into why having a model is going to be so helpful for your organization. We call this a strategic model because it really is laid out, like Bob said, over the whole first year. It's going to lay out the key aspects of a comprehensive program, and it could apply to any organization and to any employees. There might be some employee groups or maybe executives where you might tweak some of these activities, and that's perfectly fine. But this is a great starting point. It's a great framework. So if we unpack it a little bit, it starts at the top with some guiding principles. And we've put in here 5 key principles that we think are important that provide that strategic direction and alignment, right? I mean, we're doing this so that we can be aligned across the organization. So new hires are having a common experience, a consistent experience, so that we can all relate to it. Then it's broken down into the different phases. As I said, this is a 5-step process. Begins when the new employee receives his or her offer of employment. So well before they're stepping in the door. It ends after the first year of employment. So very, very important to make sure that you're spending time on this before someone is in the door. Then, of course, there are lots and lots of activities here. We've got bullet points. We have some models are more fully fleshed out than this. We wanted to give you a good sense of some of the most fundamental and important activities that you might be performing at each step. And when I say you, that is the collective you. So this is not just HR. This is the supervisor. This is your executive. This is the direct reports. This is colleagues. I mean, a lot of people come together to make this successful. And that's why the coordination piece is so important. At the bottom, we've got outcomes. If we have successfully integrated the principles and the roles, the different folks, the different activities, we should be expecting certain outcomes. And you might notice that those outcomes tie very closely with what Bob was talking about for the business case, right? I mean, so if you need to build a business case for your executive, if you want to strengthen your onboarding, having this model, which at the bottom points to these very important outcomes for the organization, might just be the best way to communicate that with your senior leaders or your executive team to get them on board with this. 2 elements that are not called out here specifically, but that we feel are also very important in onboarding, especially today. You'll understand when I tell you this first one is technology. So very important today that you are considering, if you haven't already, introducing some elements of technology to streamline, to bring consistency into your onboarding process. There's lots of ways to do that, even if it's just email, right? I mean, that would be probably at the low end, all the way to perhaps more of an HRIS system that has some of the more transactional pieces and parts of onboarding embedded into a technology type of tracking and communication system. The other essential element is measurement. Very important, and you'll see that particularly as we move into the later phases of the model, but you need to know, you need to get feedback on how successful your onboarding model is. This effort and this time that we're putting into it, and as mentioned, probably with multiple players across the organization, you want to know that that is actually producing new hires that are coming to productivity faster, that have longer retention, that are more engaged and committed. So there are a couple of ways that we are going to recommend that you do that throughout the model. This is thoughtful. I hope this is clear to you when you look at this, right? This is not something that we do the day before the person comes on board, and it's not exclusively an HR activity, though HR can very well and very often does drive this. They very often help put the framework in place and can help with the coordination. But what's that saying? It takes a village. Yes, it takes a village for onboarding. So let's unpack it a little bit by going to each of the phases. So if we start here with before the first day. So I mentioned this already. This is not the day before the first day. These are intentional steps that typically happen a week, 2 weeks, even more before the new hire begins. So if you have this framework in place, this gets a little bit easier. So you're not reinventing the wheel every time, but you still need to be pre-planning. Why is that? Because it requires a lot of communication and coordination with both the new hire, who you want to make sure you're building that excitement with, as well as the organization that you want to be building excitement with for this new person coming on board. So for instance, the welcome packet, it should definitely include logistics. It should go out ahead of time, as much as a week ahead of time if possible. It should have a schedule for the first day. This is being organized. Who was my Michelle out there who said this makes us look organized? Nothing says organized like a schedule for the first day. That says we put some thought in it. That says we care about your time and we want to get you off to a good start. Information about how to check in, though. Many times in the public sector and government, there is some sort of a protocol in terms of security, right? Is there a badge needed? I mean, who's going to be meeting this particular person? Get those things ironed out ahead of time. What's the parking like? If you can, give the person their new phone number. What's their email address, right? I mean, how cool is that? You're going to start, you're a week away and you already have your email address, right? You're feeling like you're part of the organization. Certainly any paperwork needs to be shared ahead of time if you can. Get that out to them, get that transactional piece rolling. If you can do that electronically through some means, that is most helpful. But any of that kind of pre paperwork, before you're signing on the dotted line, some basic reading, get that out ahead of time. We do not want the first day to be about filling out paperwork. And what about their desk? This is a biggie. That picture that Bob pulled out, right? That empty desk. I mean, I would say it's laughable, except I know situations that have been, unfortunately, strikingly similar to that. It's not a good look, right? So spend that time, make sure their desk is ready to go, make sure they have a computer. What about business cards? Is that something we can do ahead of time so they walk in and they get their business cards that first day or at least maybe the first week? What about a peer buddy? One of the things that we are seeing as a real best practice is partnering that new hire up with someone in the organization who can guide them, someone that they can have almost as like a trusted advisor, right? Someone that you can ask those questions to that you don't want to ask your supervisor, right? But those kind of urban legends, or those kind of the under the cover kind of things that are in your organization, like well, what is the best, how do we handle meetings? What are the things like lunch? Is it, what are some of those things that they might not know about, well, they wouldn't know about culturally, and they would be more comfortable asking someone that is a peer. That can really accelerate the cultural fit, the cultural aspects of the onboarding. When you're getting ready on all these before first day things, make sure you're putting meetings on people's calendars. It's going to be important for this new person to meet people. They're going to meet the executive. They should be meeting department heads. They should be meeting with their supervisor. They should be meeting with their teams. A lot of those meetings can be done ahead of time, by blocking calendars, but you have to schedule them, right? And these people, some of these folks, particularly maybe the management team, your executive leader, they're busy. So that's why starting this 2-3 weeks ahead of time, if you can, will ensure that you can get on those people's calendars. It's important. And that really reduces the anxiety for this new hire. If I've got this whole welcome packet, I've got my phone, I know where I'm going, I've got my new hire paperwork, which I've read through, I've got some questions now highlighted, they really feel ready to walk in that day, and they know that is going to be a meaningful day. One last note here is you want to make sure you're arranging lunch on the first day. So let's go ahead and go to that next phase here. Getting lunch organized on the first day. I know it probably maybe seems a little bit silly, but it's, again, one of those things that is going to really make that new hire feel welcomed. It could be a one-on-one with the supervisor. Maybe it's with a couple of team members. In today's world, it's probably a virtual lunch, but do a virtual lunch, right? It's just about gathering together. It's about giving that person some camaraderie, some ability to start building relationships from the get-go. And lunch is lunch, right? It's casual. So we're just going to get to know each other. That is one of the things that we're seeing is kind of lost in today's environment of onboarding. It's that more casual get to know you. How do I get to know you as a person? A big part of trusting someone is getting to know them a little bit better and getting to know them maybe a little bit outside of work, getting to know them as a person. A lot of the work that Bob does, a lot of the work that we do around employee engagement points to the organization, the supervisor acknowledging the employee as a whole person, right? They bring their whole self into work. So if you can do that the first day by arranging a lunch and having just some of that chit chat, some of that getting to know you, it really sets the right tone and gets the person off to a good start. So, and if you've done all of your advanced work that we talked about in planning, then this should actually flow really nicely. Give some thought about how you might make the day a little bit special. This new employee who's coming into this picture here that we have for you is going to get a nice plant on their desk. Maybe it's a sign on the door. My husband recently started a new job, and they had a really nice sign on his door that said, welcome, and had his name, and had some cute little graphics. It was special. It was just something that said we took a little bit of time to greet you, and we're excited about having you here. So it's important. You don't have to go over the top, although some people do, and that's great too. And again, thinking a little bit about this COVID world we're in, maybe it's like a 15-minute team meeting that just says welcome, 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 right? It doesn't have to be all day. It can just be a quick little, hey, we're going to take 10 minutes and we're going to do a quick Zoom call with our new employee and just say hi. Very important for that first greeting, particularly if it's in person. The worst is when a new employee comes in and they're maybe in the lobby, they don't know who's greeting them, or no one shows up. There's kind of this gap around who is going to be greeting this new employee. So have that ironed out, like we talked about in the planning, and then make sure that happens. Because again, this is first impression, right? Someone is there, maybe they're waiting for you, or you arrive, you check in, and now someone comes right out to get you and whisk you away, get you involved and into the environment. Be there with open arms. It's a big deal. It's all about being welcoming. This is a good day for touring the office, if you can arrange for that. Introductions to as many people as possible. So these are quick. This is not, long, drawn-out conversations, but we got to start building those relationships, and that starts with a simple introduction. Get the person oriented to the people as much as to the office. Definitely meeting with the supervisor day one, very important. And I know this is hard sometimes for supervisors. Supervisors are busy people. I get it. But it speaks volumes when the supervisor is not available to meet. What does that say? Make sure the supervisor is available and ready to meet with that new hire. That day one for sure, and probably several times during the week. Seriously, daily is not too much at this stage. Very important also for week one, meet with the executive. Meeting with the executive sets such a great tone. It really says from the top down, we are jazzed that you are here and we want to share our vision, our mission. We want to tell you what we're all about. I mean, the executive can really give that 10,000 foot level discussion and welcome. Really important. Getting connected with your peer buddy, certainly taking care of any lingering forms, finish all of that stuff up, and then focus a little bit on some of the basic needs. So those are going to be things like timekeeping, attendance, how payroll works, you know, when you get paid. That's a nice thing. People are usually kind of interested in that. What are some of the norms for office communications? You can start getting into that. You know, are we a heavily email culture? Maybe you've switched over to Teams and maybe you're using the Teams channels and Teams for communications. Maybe you've got some other collaborative tools like Slack, or, you know, maybe the norm is texting because you've all got work phones. I mean, share some of those insights. How about the intranet, right? There's tons of resources on the intranet. Make sure that that's introduced in week one. What are the systems? Common systems. This is a biggie, a real biggie. I was talking to a friend this weekend. I ran into her when in the park, and she was telling me that she was going to be changing jobs. She was miserable. And I said, well, why? What's going on? She said she had been onboarded during the pandemic, and the onboarding had been just terrible. And I said, well, gosh, give me some insights. I'm actually going to be talking about this. And she said one of the worst things was access to the systems. Because there was no going into the office, there was no going over to IT, there was not a lot of sitting down with people. One of her big challenges was not being able to access and understand how the systems worked, how they fit together. What did she mean? Where to find things? Well, imagine how frustrating that would be as a new employee. So spend some time orienting your new hire to common systems. This is where you start talking about expectations as well, just in the beginning there with those supervisory meetings, and start giving them some meaningful work, right? We said it's not about paperwork. It's about building those relationships, getting them set up for success with their systems, and starting them on some tasks, small tasks. Team them up with a colleague. Go over a standard operating procedure and then assign a task. The sooner you get them working, the sooner they're going to feel immersed and valuable. Everyone wants to feel useful. So, and lunch, I mentioned lunch earlier. Okay, lunch during week one, at least once or twice, make sure that lunch has been coordinated and planned. So I've been talking for a long time. I hope you've taken some notes, but now we're going to turn the tables back to you because we're kind of curious. You know, we've been talking about before day one, week one. Do you remember what your first day and week was like? What was it like? Give us a little bit of insight. This could be the good, the bad, the ugly, you know, it's all, we're safe zone here. What was it like? Just to give us a couple thoughts.
Onslaught of information. There you go.
Oh, yes, yes. That's a great insight. It will feel that way. Horrible.
Oh.
Intimidating.
Intimidating. Oh, slow waiting. Yes, I've experienced that as well. You're kind of left alone sometimes. Here, read this, fill this out. People are friendly. It can be a bit of a blur of names and people. A lot of reading. Yeah, that is very typical with onboarding.
Lots of paperwork to fill out. No email for 30 days. No clocks in the room. Sounds like Las Vegas. No cell phones allowed. Oh, I see. It was a correctional institution, but still no email for 30 days. That's not so good.
We've had some great experiences here too. I'm glad to see that. At Academy, they did everything very well. And guess what? Amanda is still at that organization. Thank you, Amanda, for being part of our statistics there.
Great onboarding handoff between training and actually being released to the supervisor. Needs work, but Oh, that was good, I guess.
Yes, good, good. Well, thank you for sharing that, because what I kind of wanted to point out there is it's memorable. People will remember, especially if they've had a really bad experience or if they've had a really good experience. So it's worth it. The time is worth it. This will make the difference. So let's fast forward now on our model to 3 months in. Cool. Are we still onboarding? Yes, we are. Everybody nod your head with me. We are still onboarding. So by now the new employee has their sea legs. They know where the bathroom is. They know their team. They have been doing hopefully some meaningful work. They know the basic protocols. Build on that momentum, because as people said, it was a whirlwind. You know, I met a ton of people. There was a ton of information. So the first 3 months is the time to really digest all of that and to really move into more of a comfort zone. So as a supervisor, you need to be meeting with your new hire regularly, at least weekly, we would recommend, but sometimes it might be daily or a couple of times a week. Provide feedback, right? They are sponges at this stage. It's the honeymoon phase, right? People they want to know, how am I doing, right? And they're actually receptive to how I'm doing. So tell them when they're doing well. Tell them when you want them to take on some new stuff. Tell them when you need them to maybe do some additional training with someone to grow some of their skills, right? They're going to be growing their skills because they're learning you, the organization, they're learning their job, they're learning the clients. It is a lot of learning. So build on that momentum, regular meetings, lots of feedback. Keep reinforcing the goals and the expectations. You want to keep that person feeling like they are progressing, and you want to keep reinforcing, oh, great, you've learned this, this, and that. Perfect. Now we're going to move you into this task and this task. I'm going to have you team up with Shirley, and you're going to work on this particular assignment, because we want to keep growing your ability to interact with these projects, to interact with your teams. Recognize those small wins. That will really keep that new hire motivated. If you're doing the peer buddy, peer partner thing, make sure that that is still going. They don't have to meet every week. You know, it can be kind of become more of an ad hoc thing. I remember we had a new hire here at CPS, and it was someone I knew from a prior work experience, and so we kind of organically became peer buddies, and he would come over and say things like, oh my God, you know, what's up with that thing or that, you know, communication or whatever. And I could say like, oh, don't worry about that. You know, here's a little background. And then he didn't have to, you know, wonder like, oh my God, did I just step in something? You know, I could kind of give him the lowdown. It really helped him to acclimate. It really helped him to focus on what he needed to and not worry about some of those extraneous things that happen. So the first 6 months in, so this is now we're at the 3 to 6 month stage. Now your expectations of this new hire are really starting to, I think, clarify and solidify even more, right? Instead of short-term goals, which we've probably been working on thus far because we're just trying to do the quick skill building, learning the systems, learning processes. Now we can start talking a little bit more globally about expectations and goals, you know, pertaining to the rest of the year. A lot of this is kind of the same as is in the second and third month. You're still providing a lot of performance feedback. You're still meeting with your new hire on a regular basis. I think where we see people fall down here is that they stop meeting so much. And I'm going to encourage you not to do that. I'm going to encourage you to keep it up. The trick is to keep up those meetings. This first 12 months is really critical. The new hire needs that regular platform to ask questions and to grow their knowledge. There's still a lot of training going on. They're still meeting new people probably, and it's definitely deepening those relationships with their colleagues, deepening those the relationships and the experience through the work, right? And hopefully also through some of these less formal interactions. Again, with maybe some Zoom meetings, some team things maybe that are done that are a little bit more morale building, a little bit more team building. those types of things. Now is when you need to start thinking about evaluating the onboarding process. What we do is we've got the surveys that we do and that we recommend at certain times. I mean, we really stress getting some feedback immediately after that first week from the new hire on how it's going and if there are any gaps. But certainly now, when we're at the 3 to 6 months range, some sort of more formal survey that would go to the new hire. It would also go probably to the supervisor. Those two are probably most key. But even some of the other folks who've been involved in the onboarding process, how was it from their perspective? You know, did they have the information they needed? Did it feel organized? Was it planned for the new hire? Are they feeling like they're coming up to speed? How do they feel that they're fitting in culturally? How is the technical job training coming along? You want to know these things early because at this point you can still intervene, right? You can still make these little course corrections. So do it. Stay the course. Don't give up. You know, keep those meetings going, keep that communication going, and get some feedback in case you need to course correct. So now we get to the end of our first year, and here, you know, we might be wearing masks at the end of your first year. We don't really know yet. If you are, what I would encourage though is some sort of a mix, even though we're operating largely in a virtual world, of some sort of gathering, some sort of face-to-face in a social distancing format, of course, because this is cause for celebration. Getting to the first year, it's a big, big milestone for people. Do something a little special. Is there some sort of mug or something with M&Ms, a message from the organization, lunch with the supervisor, something to commemorate it? You definitely want to do that performance review, conduct a performance review at this time, give them that feedback, and then part of that is moving into planning for the next year. You know, what are we going to be developing? How are you going to be growing? What is your future here? How do we want to keep you engaged? And then once again, you're going to be evaluating that process. So we want to spend just a little bit of time talking about onboarding during COVID. I've given you some hints and some tips as we've gone along, but really you need to acknowledge one of the main things that's important here is to acknowledge that it's harder. It truly, truly is. It is harder to learn a new job and it is harder to learn new people. But if you do what we said in that model, all of those things in that model are transferable to an online mode. It just takes a little bit more planning. It takes a little bit more coordination. What we're finding in the COVID world is that things are more formal. They have to be scheduled. You can't drop in on someone. You can't just have a casual conversation. You have to schedule that time to connect. You need to be using screens where you can screen share and collaborate so like literally I'm like pointing at the screen, right? And the other person is visualizing it because they are with me on that screen. They can see my mouse. It's much, much harder because we don't have the mechanisms we usually do when we sit with someone, when we are co-located. Real story, you know, from someone I know well. Their first day, they were onboarded during COVID. First day, the supervisor said, "I'm sorry, it's our busiest time. I'm really not going to be able to interact with you much between now and the next, you know, 4 to 6 weeks." They didn't meet at all in person at all. Maybe a phone call once a week. Oh my gosh. I mean, this person was really adrift, right? I mean, they tried to work with some of their colleagues. They set up some training sessions, but literally adrift at home. So, right, it's one thing probably to be adrift in the office where you can go and talk with colleagues. You can ask them if you can sit with them. But now you're adrift at home and all of your colleagues are also online, virtual. Very difficult situation. So don't do that. Recognize that it's going to take more effort from the supervisor and more effort from the team. Really, on our next slide, we talk about how it's a picture, but you need to know your audience. So if you're onboarding during this time, you need to ask that new hire how they like to learn, what are their learning preferences, and try to accommodate them. Also be mindful of your timing. Like in my story, I mean, if the supervisor and team really doesn't have time to train someone to put that extra effort in, this is probably not a good time to onboard. I'll clue you in, that person I was talking about, they're not at that job anymore. They are off to a new job already. So really, really important. Talk to your new hires. Ask them how they learn best. Talk with them about different ways. This is about being flexible in the way that you can interact with them, and try, if they say, really, I learn best in person, then are there some team members who are willing to come in, who we can set up a socially distanced type of learning environment. Flexibility here is key. And then the next slide here talks about technology. Make sure you're using all of the technology options. There are a lot of technology options. We talked earlier about how onboarding in today's world should have some components of technology. Now, though, these particular options are around engaging with technology. So not so much the paperwork side of it, but make sure you're using video camera. Make sure you're using video conference when you're talking with your new hire, when you're having these meetings, when you're doing your check-ins, when they are learning from other coworkers. I know sometimes coworkers don't want to be on camera. They're at home, maybe they've got kids at home, they've got dogs, the leaf blower's going. It doesn't matter. All of that is forgiven in the world of the pandemic. It's the connection that you have to drive. And face-to-face is going to do that in a way that just an audio or a phone conference is not going to do. And then use those online collaboration tools. You share those screens, work on documents together. Even if maybe one employee is working on a big project and they're simply just screen sharing and describing, okay, now I'm doing this and now I'm doing this and here's my next step, here's my next step. But just know showing someone one time in that environment is probably not going to do it, right? You're going to have to spend a little bit more time with the training aspects because of this, doing it remotely and online. For some people, might be more challenging. Now, some people might take right to it, and that's great too. So it kind of goes back to my previous point about knowing and understanding their learning style. Ask them what was effective, what worked, what didn't work, and then build in more of what worked. So that was a quick tour through some of the considerations for COVID. We were going to, do we have time for this, Bob? Do you think a quick chat?
Yeah, I think we have 1 minute for this.
Okay, 1 minute. So this is the land of make-believe. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a new hire, and you were just hired during the pandemic, and you are working 100% from home. Your whole team is from home, the team you're part of, all remote. What would help you? And this is so that we can just do some crowdsource sharing here for the team. I mean, because this is the reality we're in. What would help you if you envision yourself learning a new job from home, online? What types of things might make that experience better for you? Training videos, Zoom meetings, yes. Training videos it's a great idea. Powtoon is a great option for creating little videos. You can do pre-recorded webinars, which will help. Having a mentor, that's right. That person that could kind of be on speed dial.
And meetings, Zoom meetings, team meetings, regular meetings to get to know everyone, as you suggested, Melissa.
Yeah, manager and team support. That just cannot be overstated. Like just acknowledging the situation we're in, lots of communication around how are you learning? How are you progressing? What are the obstacles? How can we get over those obstacles? Pre-scheduled daily check-ins. Love it. Love it.
Goes along with an available supervisor.
That is key, I must say.
Having a coworker or webcam with me constantly, like another device sitting next to me.
Yeah.
Kind of like the virtual fans at the NBA basketball games.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, assigning real work. Real work is huge, right? Get them feeling productive. There's nothing like learning by doing something that you're going to be doing anyways. It feels more meaningful. They're going to remember it better because it's just harder to remember if you're doing things online.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left, so maybe we should.
I guess we better start wrapping this up. Yeah. So two things that I hope came through loud and clear so far. Have a plan and plan for extra communication. It's the world we're living in today. It will serve you well. You will not regret it.
So here, just as a refresher, is the onboarding model. Melissa went through it. I like to focus on the bottom part of it, which is the return on investment, particularly engagement and commitment. We've at the Institute worked with dozens of organizations across the country, public sector, border to border and coast to coast. And one of the things we've found as we help them measure and improve engagement is that the supervisor has a tremendous impact on the level of engagement. And organizations with a high level of engagement typically do a good job of onboarding their new employees, making them feel welcome and giving them the support and the resources they need to be successful. So the takeaways: there is a strong business case, including in the public sector. This is not just another touchy-feely thing. Good onboarding makes a difference in terms of performance, service delivery, retention, employee engagement. It spans the first 12 months, and the model we showed you illustrated some activities that should occur in these 5 phases. There's a much bigger list, but we wanted to just give you some examples. As Melissa just said, you have to be intentional about it. Nothing is better than when a new employee shows up and is presented with a comprehensive onboarding plan. Imagine how welcome that person feels. Has to be flexible, particularly in the COVID-19 environment. You have to deal with people one at a time with respect to their technology setup, their learning capacity, their learning preferences, and so on. And it's not just HR. It's just as much about creating a good relationship with the new supervisor and giving the employee important work to do right from the start. So I'm going to turn it back to Jason, see if we have any time for questions. If we do, we'll answer some.
We're pretty tight here, but we can do our best. So one of the questions is, can we get how do we get data to provide our executive management with, so they can see how urgent it is that we have a formal onboarding process for new employees soon, immediately after they're hired, versus 6-month intervals?
You know, I take a crack at that. I think there are 2 answers to that question. One is take a look at what the research shows about the business case for engagement. Convince senior leaders that, as I said earlier, it's not just another touchy-feely thing. It is really about making sure that our new employees have a fast time to productivity, perform well, and stay with the organization. Make the business case. The other side of the coin, though, is, do you have data within your own organization? For example, retention. What's turnover look like? What's turnover look like among new employees? You have higher turnover among new employees than you have among not so new employees. If so, you have a problem. Are people leaving in particular gender or race and ethnic groups? In that case, you have a problem. So there is a strong business case at a macro level, but you also can take a look at your own experience at a micro level.
I think we have time for one more.
Jason, I just wanted to quickly say, so a couple of people have asked about that platform for creating videos, Powtoon, and I put it out in the chat.
Cool. What are some good questions to ask and practices to initiate when you're being onboarded?
Well, I could take a crack at a couple of those, and then Bob can, because I talked about it. I mean, especially now, I think it is really important to get a lot of feedback from the new hire continually about, what's working for them, what types of methods that you're using in the training is working. Is it too much communication? Is it not enough communication? Do they need a little bit of face-to-face? Do we need to figure out how we can make that happen? Are they comfortable online, but they want to maybe do a little bit more screen sharing, so they need some training on Microsoft Teams to do that? So I would think a lot of questions right now, particularly about how their learning is progressing, and learning not only the technical side, but learning the people, so that you can surface early, oh gosh, so my new hire really isn't meeting regularly with their team. Okay, that is going to inhibit some of their learning. So then how do we get that engineered in so that it's a little more structured in terms of them meeting with their team? Or maybe if you find that that portion is not, you find questioning, like, you know, are you feeling like you're fitting in? Are you feeling like you're learning some of the cultural aspects? And the answer is no. That might be a good trigger then to find a peer buddy, someone who then can kind of take on that role of more of the acculturation of some of the cultural aspects. Bob, what would you add?
I think you did a great job. The only thing I would say is go back to the difference between orientation and onboarding. Orientation is typically something we do to employees. Onboarding is something we do with employees. It's interactive. It's a two-way street. And to do all the things that Melissa said, to make sure that the employee is getting what they need to be productive and to stay with the organization and to feel good about the job and the organization.
Yeah. Someone put in the chat using StrengthsFinder or similar tool. That can be a good way to engage the employee with the team. Like if the whole team has done StrengthsFinder and having the employee take the StrengthsFinder, and then that would be like a great little virtual lunch, is to all now learn what the new employees' strengths are, and then kind of talk about, gosh, how does that now complement and help our team grow and flourish? So that's a good idea.
Well, Melissa and Bob, I wanted to thank you very much for presenting today. Again, for everyone that is on the webinar, if you want a copy of the slides or want to pass them along to coworkers or want a copy of the recording, it will be available on our website. I posted that in the chat as well, and I will also post it on our LinkedIn page. And if you have any follow-up questions or would like anyone to contact you regarding your onboarding process, please note that in the survey at the end of the webinar, and we'd be happy to reach out to you. So thanks again, Melissa and Bob. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Stay healthy.
Stay healthy indeed.